Hello, viewers. Welcome to the Art Lounge Alley. This is Drawing Comics, part 45. I am your host, and I'm going to continue working on Conan the Barbarian. This is John Buscema's work. This is where I left off last week. And I'm going to be building on this last panel right here. I'm going to say I'm like more than halfway done with this comic. Well, as far as like penciling goes, I have yet to go back to even my old sketchbook. I got a bunch of panels there and start inking. And recently, I have decided to move away from this tool right here. While it is great for certain things, like for example, if you are nowhere near a desk, let's say you're doing this outside, right? You're sitting somewhere, and drawing from real life or something, and you want to ink it. So this is perfect for that because you don't need to have like the bottle there of ink for you to be able to like dip your brush into and clean things or whatever. This is all just kind of like on a go sort of thing. It's useful for that. That's kind of what I'm going to turn to this tool for. But what I don't like about it is that you have to like clean it regularly, and the ink dries inside of it. So it's a bit of a hassle. There's a couple of steps that you have to take in order to be able to make it functional. Whereas when it just comes to using a regular brush, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to clean. It's a lot easier to refill because all you just need one of these. Where is it? There you go. Bombay Black India ink, and you just could drip that in and dip your ink, your brush into it, and there you go. You got fresh ink. And just looking back at a lot of these comic book artists back in the day, that's what they used. They didn't have any special tools or anything like that. They just used a regular brush. And they got incredible amount of detail. Like, just looking at any of this stuff right here. Granted, this is kind of smaller. I'm going to say it's a little bit smaller than comic book paper, because comic book paper measures out to be like 14 by... I'm going to say like 14 or 16 by 11. I don't remember exactly what the size for it is, but it's a lot bigger, so you got a lot more space in order to be able to draw bigger panels. So little detail isn't as small as you would see on here. But yeah, they would get really fine lines. Like just looking at the shadows that are on his bicep, there's a mixture of all sorts of lines from thin to thick, and that's all done with a brush. So kind of want to achieve that level of ability when it comes to using a brush. There's just a lot of stuff that's being sold that's kind of unnecessary. It's just kind of like capitalism in a nutshell. Selling you a bunch of shit you don't need. That ends up contributing towards environmental disasters, ecological disasters, disease, all that other stuff, simply because, people want a Go-Gurt or something. I recently saw an ad that said, no time to have dinner, no problem. And of course, it's some sort of like plastic made container with some food that's overly processed. So the solution isn't to actually give people the time to eat, to have energy to work. The solution is to give them stuff that they can, shovel in their mouth real quick so that they can come back and serve a greedy company that refuses to give them livable wages. Because I'm going to say that most people who are on that sort of go aren't really working office jobs. Office jobs that have a little bit more leniency as far as time goes and such. Those are people who are being exploited for their time and hard work. And rather than actually having that fixed, companies are like, buy this other thing that's really going to give bosses more time with your labor. Well, you get old. And the thing is, it's just going to escalate. Until people band together and they shut down the economy demanding change, it's just going to escalate because they're going to see like, oh, there's resistance. We got to put more pressure on them and make things even more unlivable and unbearable so that way they cave in. They cave in to our greed and our corruption and our destruction. And all that. Our exploitation, our desire for you to die off while making us profits. I mean, I haven't forgotten the fact that they demanded people to go back to work at the peak of the pandemic before any vaccines were available. I haven't forgotten about that. And did any of the politicians in power do anything about that? The ones who claim that they're for the people? I mean, they're serving a system that basically is at a gridlock. And it's going to be a gridlock starting next year as well. Well, in January. January 3rd, to be very specific, it's going to be another gridlock. What do I mean by that? Well, it's going to be the 118th Congress in play. And that's going to be a majority for the Nazis in the House of Representatives, which is not what the case is right now. Right now, the House of Representatives have a Democratic majority. But starting January 3rd, it's going to be the opposite. And then the Senate, right, that's the other chamber. That's what makes up the House of Congress. It's two chambers. It's the House of Representatives and the Senate combined together that make up Congress. So once that's going to be put in play starting January the 3rd, it's going to be the Senate, which has not a Democratic majority, as people want to believe or think is going to be the case. There's Manchin and there's Sinema. Both of those people are actually Republicans. They're just in disguise. They're put in play over there so that whenever the Nazis don't want to send a bill that disfavors them, they get these people to vote no. So it never really passes the House. It doesn't get passed on to the Senate for the Senate to sign anything. So now they have that in the Senate. They have these two political members in there who are going to favor the Nazi party, basically. And they're going to be like, here, no, we're not going to sign for that. Give us more money so we make sure we don't do that. Stuff their pockets with it. Of course, they got lobbyists as well for companies and corporations that don't want certain laws that are going to disfavor their profits. So none of these politicians that are for the people are going to get anything done starting next year. It's going to be the more of the same. You're going to see headlines. They're going to be like, this really important bill is on the table for discussion, and people are debating about it. Is it going to pass? And then like months later, after like quote unquote some debating, they're going to be like, nope, it's not going to pass. Nobody voted for it. We didn't have enough votes to actually pass it onto the Senate for it to be signed. And then if it does, for whatever reason, which it won't, it's going to be passed off to the Senate, and the Senate needs to vote, have the vote majority there. So if the Democrats, for example, have the majority, it has to be more than 50 votes. But with those two in play, it's going to bring things down to 49. So right now the prediction is 51 to 49. But with Manchin and Sinema, and I'm sure there's other Democrats who are pawns basically, who are capitalist fascist pawns, and who are easily bought out with a bunch of money, they're also going to vote no. So if the House of Representatives passes a bill to the Senate, then the Senate is also going to say no. So it's a deadlock. Like, nothing is going to get passed, and the economy is just going to keep getting worse. It's going to favor people with a bunch of money, and your life, if you're not one of those, is just going to get more and more miserable. You're going to be under the thumb of all these fat corporations who basically want to keep exploiting you, while trying to sell that you're living in a free nation, and you're here like in a democracy and freedom of choice and all that other stuff. It doesn't apply to people. They're just talking about the rich here. And that's pretty much it. Your average everyday person is just exploitation, basically. It's money in the pockets of really rich people. And that's pretty much it. And it's just going to continue to get worse. You know, more people, more fascism is going to grow. And the only thing that we can do, which has been proven to be effective in other countries as well, in countries that have a lot more of an oppressive regime going on, is by protesting. If 1,000 people, just 1,000 people even, march through the streets day after day after day demanding livable wages, demanding less hours of work while having livable wages, demanding things like student loan forgiveness. That should have been done a long time ago, you know. It would be just as effective. Iran has been protesting for months, and now they've abolished the morality police. I mean, they have so much more work to do. I don't think that they should stop there. There's a lot more to do to improve their economy and their social structure, basically. But it just goes to show how effective that is. Because really, they need us, you know, us, the working people, us who aren't part of the 1% or whatever. They need us. We don't need their business. We can create other businesses, you know, people who are siding with the people, they can create businesses. And I think that's one of the most important steps, is people who are for the people, who have money, who believe in democracy, who believe in diversity and a better future. They need to invest and create jobs that are maintained, that are owned by progressive and democratic people. You know, and I think supply chains, because that's another roadblock, right? Because if you create a business and all the supply chains are owned by fascists, they're going to create a roadblock there. They're going to make it so overwhelmingly expensive that you won't be able to have the right wages or whatever. But I think that government budget should go into play. I mean, look at the defense bill that recently popped up. Trillions of dollars. Like almost beyond. And where's that money coming from? It's all of our taxes. That's all the taxes that are being funneled into that. There's a lot of corruption there. It's absolutely a bunch of corruption. It's abuse of our taxes. So instead of actually using that money to pay teachers livable wages, to pay not just livable wages, excellent wages. You know, we want to have teachers who are excited to go in and teach kids progressive ways of dealing with problems, you know, whether it's psychological relationships or whatever it is. You know, that kind of sets up the future. That sets up how people are going to interact with each other, whether they're going to be able to problem solve, how they're going to problem solve, how they're going to create businesses and make them functional. Like, it all really depends on the education of the future. So yeah, paying teachers great wages, also upping their standard, you know, having a psychology degree so that they can approach all forms of learning. They can approach things like, you know, somebody who is falling behind. How do you go about that? You know, figuring that out. Having a class that requires people to interact with one another and come up with and talk about different ways of dealing with issues, whether it's interpersonal, family related, you know, teaching people values and talking about different scenarios and being like, well, what would happen if a person did this? You know, what are the outcomes of that? And just that sort of like debating sort of class, I think, should be a requirement. Social interaction should be a requirement, just like all the other things. You know, if we have like a gym class, that's a requirement. Why not have a social interaction class? Talking about things like sexism and what that's been like in history and what kind of problems it created and why, you know, etc. Like, really just getting into these interactive issues that we have, social interactive issues that we've faced. That's where it really starts to get eliminated, is in the education system. So yeah, teachers should have better degrees when it comes to that. You know, psychology degree, talking about interpersonal skills, interaction skills, conversational skills, like all that really shapes the future, shapes how people treat each other, how they see each other. But instead, all that money is being poured into defense bills because they don't want a good education. They don't want you to be smart. I mean, there's a school multiple schools that have been shut down in Philadelphia because it saves the district, you know, the politicians of that district. It saves them millions of dollars. So they close down these schools rather than figuring out, well, how do we improve education for the people here and make things better? They're closing them down instead. Because who are they going to have left to blame if things are going to go wrong? Who are they going to have to blame or use in order to save money and stuff it in their pockets and the pockets of their interests, if there's nobody to blame? If people are educated and they have great opportunities and such, they won't. When you have a culture that predominantly, what they've been told, what they've been taught, what their generation, the older people of their generation have taught them, survival of the fittest. When you have an entire generation of people, old people, who are perpetuating it by teaching young kids this concept and telling them, well, this is what the game is. This game, that's what they call people's lives, which is very much a sociopathic way of looking at things. When they're teaching that to their kids, what are the kids going to do? They're going to go and teach that to other kids, and they're going to teach that to their kids. So it's just perpetuating this Nazi concept that makes things unsustainable, that makes things more and more violent and crazy, and perpetuates all the wars and terrible social interaction, because it also allows them to create wars and profit from them. So it's a sickness. It's a sickness that corrupts everything, that destroys everything for the sake of more power, for the sake of more money. It's absolutely not sustainable. And that's not the kind of future that we want to build. As a society, as people, we have to move away from that, and we have to start getting more progressive, enjoyable society, a society where people can interact with one another and enjoy each other, rather than constantly being at war with one another because of these old Nazi fart principles and values that are being passed down over and over and over again. You think all these young people, they most of them are just perpetuating stuff because they're trust fund kids too. They're the parents they have Nazi values, and they tell them well, if you support, if you vote, or if you believe in what we believe in, well, you're going to get this trust fund, you're going to get these opportunities, you're going to make this money. It's not young people who are the problem, it's the old people. They're the ones perpetuating it. I mean, look at Congress. That's predominantly just old white people who were born during the time of the Nazi regime, and considering a lot of them actually supported it, well, they're the ones making decisions now. They're the ones who are trying to decide your future. And the thing about all this is that, does anybody know what happens once we're gone? Nobody knows that. So they're playing a game with your life that you don't know if you're going to have a chance to live. And I think that we need to take action. We can't allow sociopaths and psychopaths play these games with this reality that we don't know what the outcome of it is going to be, And the only way to do it is direct action. As I mentioned, if you're going to depend on a political system that has a gridlock right now, and it's going to have another gridlock for the next 4 years, or even 2 years, let's just say it's going to be 2 years for a re-election again. Of course, they're going to pull more stunts to prevent any sort of failure, as they see, on their part, or failing all the lobbyists and corporations that are pouring money into them. Of course, they're going to pull more stunts to do it. So maybe in the next 2 years, or after these 2 years, things might be getting better. No. Maybe in 4 years. That's 4 years of your life that you're putting in the hands of people who are just corrupt. Who knows if that's really going to change anything. We can't be bystanders. We have to actually start doing things, and the only way to do it is to protest. And that's something that happened back in That's something that happened back in the 1800s. If you question, where did the 8 hours come from? What happened? Who decided that? Why is it considered to be 8 hours? Well, really, it's because it used to be 11 to 13 hours and they had child labor. So like kids were like six, well, not six, I don't know, I'm gonna say 8, 9, 10, were working in factories. This is like back where the Industrial Revolution just started, and like they started using automation for production. Yeah, like that was common practice. Really abusive and insane working conditions. It used to even be 6 times a week. These are the type of people, they're mentally sick people. And how that changed to 8 hours was people eventually had enough. They're like, no, we want to enjoy our life. Like, we're not going to just work, eat, sleep, and die. You know, we want to actually have time to explore, to live, to experience, to enjoy things. And they came together and they started demanding 8 hours and living wages. As a new standard. And of course that was rejected. Of course there were a bunch of Nazis who were just like, oh, that's just going to cause more problems, and you know, the economy is going to crash, and blah 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 blah, and you know, oh, inflation, and you don't know what you're talking about, and blah, you know, all the stuff that you're basically seeing now. Everything that you're seeing now, all the retorts that are coming from them, all the, you know, all the Nazi gaslighting bullshit that's coming from them, that was present back then, without a doubt. Even worse, I would imagine. But people banded together, they protested, and when they were met with a bunch of no's, they shut down the economy. That's exactly what happened. They shut down the economy. It all collapsed. And all the people who were exploiting people, they started to panic because all their businesses, everything was just going downhill. So if we want to see change, that's going to be for the people. We have to come together and we have to protest consecutively. It can't be just like once and that's it, because of course they're going to suspect that. Of course they're going to know that. Oh, it's going to happen once, we just have to deal with it and that's it. No, it has to be consistent, as you saw in Iran, the way that they were doing it for months. And the best way to go about it is to have groups. So you got, let's say, group A, it has like 1,000 people and they protest, and then group B comes in, they take over that time slot and they protest, and group C comes in and each one of them is like 1,000 people, and they just keep rotating. So group A could go back and rest and take care of things, then group B comes in, they take over, etc., etc., etc. That's the best way to go about it. You know, we have to show that we make up the economy, we make their profits. Without us, no profits. There's nothing that they could do to make that money back. Absolutely not. So we as the people have to come together and demonstrate that and show that you're screwing with our life. Basically, you're screwing with our ability to exist and experience and enjoy ourselves because you just like money, because you have this mental sickness, and that's not going to fly with us. You know, we have to come together to do it. There's absolutely no other alternative to this. It's just getting worse and worse. And they're going to continue to do that. You know, they want to put the pressure on. They've been working to make sure people are divided, you know, by making this like competitive culture where people are undermining each other, outdoing each other, proving to be superior, inferior, better than, less than, you know, that whole garbage. That's what they've been doing. They've been doing it to divide people so that people are, you know, undermining each other, cutting each other off, proving themselves to be better than others. And that's like the corporate ladder climbing approach, you know, that people commend that. That's commendable. And that's what they've been doing. It's a trap. It's a way to have less people band together, have people resent each other. You know, that's perfect. How are they going to come together when that's the culture? That's how you interact with one another. And that's one of the reasons why that is perpetuated. Aside from the fact that that's what they were taught when they were younger. They were brainwashed just the same way to believe that. They were conditioned to believe that. So it's just perpetuating that same idea. And we have to see through that. We have to realize, like, hey, we're getting brainwashed here, and we're being used and divided for this reason. I mean, I think one of the most important things, aside from obviously having more time to yourself and having livable wages, is restructuring the school system. Teaching, as I was mentioning, teaching kids how to interact with one another in a progressive manner, in a way that doesn't include these like Nazi values and behaviors. As I mentioned, having classes that discuss all sorts of social scenarios. What if this happens? Like, what is the best way to look about it? To see it? What's the best way to deal with that? Family scenarios. Having great guidance counselors, get great therapists. There's definitely kids who come from broken homes, abusive homes, drug addicted and alcohol abusing homes. Like, that's absolutely the case. And those kids need perspective. You might not reach them completely, but at least giving them some sort of perspective outside of like the toxic environment that they're in. And that's sometimes what you kind of need, in order to create that change within a person, is for them to actually see something beyond what's just what they're surrounded by. I think one of the best examples of that is like the idea of people coming into existence with a flashlight and just seeing one direction with that light. That's all they're seeing. And then having somebody else come along with a flashlight and shine the light towards another direction that they've seen themselves in. And now this person has two. So if they never gotten that experience of that other person with their flashlight and them showing them a different path, they would have just continued. Like, how do they know? They don't know. So they know what's there and what they could follow. And that's pretty much it. So guidance counselors, therapists that are in schools are those flashlights, basically, in different perspectives. And that's what I was talking about, having like restructured schools, having schools that have teachers who are paid really well because they have, well, first of all, because they had to go to college and they had to study all this stuff and make sure that it was worth the time and worth the money in order to keep pursuing it. But right now, teachers who are going into college to learn all this stuff, they're not getting paid well coming out. So it's all systematic. It's all made in a way that is about profit. That is about these big wigs, basically, that created the system to be this way. Doctors are there to save lives, so they're getting paid a lot of money. Well, teachers are there to save lives as well. They should be getting paid a lot of money as well. Instead of $1 trillion, like $100 trillion or $900 trillion defense bill, maybe $1 trillion to education systems. That sounds great, right? And all this stuff isn't going to happen overnight. We're going to, if people start protesting, there's going to be a lot of issues that come out from that. But knowing that it's for the future, it's not going to happen now. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It might not happen within a year, but as we continue to push for this sort of change, as we continue to make that, eventually things are going to be better. Of course, now we have a bunch of people who are crazy and racist and drug and alcohol abusers. They don't know how to interact with people. That's all going to be there. There's awful people around everywhere, and it's probably going to be around for a very long time. But at least the trajectory is going towards a better path. You know, fixing all these things that cause those kind of people. You know, most of the time, people that we do encounter, it's because of this broken system. It's because that there's been racism for such a really long time. It's because they don't have these opportunities in education systems that give them those flashlights that I was talking about, those perspectives that I was mentioning, you know, or don't have these like ways for people to learn and figure out how to interact with each other in order for them not to pursue, let's say, awful jobs or awful ways of making money or whatever else. You know, so that's for the future, really. That's just there's some people who we can't fix now, but what we can fix is what the future is going to be like. You know, what the future generation is going to think like, how they're going to behave, you know, and yeah, a lot of it has to do with that. You can't force parents to act responsibly. That's just not going to happen. But we can pay teachers well and have really good education for teachers, progressive education for teachers, not fascist, abusive type, you know, the ones that are like, oh, the way you go about it is by like punishing them and blah, 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 blah. No, I'm talking about progressive that actually have understanding of psychology and understanding of how to interact with people and so on and so forth. Like having that in play is going to shape the future towards a different trajectory. You know, that's one thing for sure. Having, like as I mentioned, having 5 hours instead of 8 hours gives people time to think about things, you know, instead of being really irritated because they come home and they're already halfway done. Well, not halfway, almost their entire day is gone and they just have a couple of hours. You know, they watch like one series and it's already time for them to get ready for the next day. That, of course, that's going to make people irritated. Of course, that's going to have parents like not invest time in their kids because they want to invest time in themselves. Of course, that's going to happen. And who's going to want to come home, right? And think about all this stuff. Like, how do we fix all these problems? How do we fix all these issues? Who's going to want to do that? Who's going to invest any of their money? Like, I'm getting, you know, political newsletters, and they're saying, hey, you know, invest in our campaign. We're not part of lobbyists and so on and so forth. And I give what I can, but most people aren't going to care for that. They're going to be like, no, I'm barely making money. Why am I going to invest in your campaign right now? And why would they even spend the little time that they have thinking about the stuff that is infuriating? They won't. You know, so we have to have time in order for people to actually contribute and think about this stuff and, you know, figure out all these solutions and still have time to enjoy themselves. Otherwise, corruption is just going to keep on doing what they're doing. You know, nobody's going to bat an eye because they're too busy trying to enjoy themselves with the little amount of time that they do have. And of course, livable wages goes without saying. It's not just about fixing the future, but for themselves, for people to be in a good state of mind, to be happy. Well, right now, it's the complete opposite. You know, that everybody's pissed, irritated, barely paying for the inflation and all that other stuff that's going on. Why would they spend their money on the very people who aren't really doing much to change things, you know. So there's a lot in play, and that those things would really change things around. But don't expect politicians to do it, because again, there's going to be roadblocks every step of the way to ensure that doesn't happen. We have to do it as people. Like, we have to protest, we have to come together, we got to do all that stuff that was done back in 1800s in order for that to happen again. There's absolutely no way, especially now, considering the results, that's ever going to happen. None of those politicians, whether they're wearing a red tie or a blue tie, are going to sign any of that into law. Forget it. Like, if you're hoping on that, if you think that in 4 years that's going to happen, if you think that's going to be a possibility in 2 years, you're just fooling yourself. You're falling into their trap, basically. They want you dependent on them because that gives them the upper hand. They could keep exploiting things. They're like, oh, we're coming closer. Oh, no, not this time. Maybe next year. Meanwhile, they're stuff in their pockets, stuff in the pockets of their special interests, and putting in trillions of dollars into defense bills. Trillions, $100 trillion. Don't think politicians are going to solve these problems. They won't. They're exploiting their position. That's why we have to come together and boot them out. That's why it's in the Constitution, is because the founding fathers anticipated things like that would happen. It's repeated, you know, it's something that they know is bound to happen. And they put that into law. Protesting, freedom of speech, you know, that being protected under law. For these specific reasons, when there's a gridlock, and it's been like that for a while, nothing other than protest is going to get through. There's a lot more other stuff that I'm going to talk about in other streams that have to do with schools, and how a lot of this is also systematic from schools. How a lot of these Nazi values, the interaction, it also comes from schools as well, how it's perpetuated from there. But I'm going to save that for another stream. As far as the stream goes, this week, there's going to be some exciting new stuff coming this Wednesday. There's going to be a special intro. It's going to be something new. It's not related to Gil Elfgren, but Gil Elfgren is continuing. It's going to be, I believe, the final stream for Gil Elfgren's influences, the guys that you've been seeing these past month, I'm going to say. This past month and month and a half. That Friday is going to be the final stream for that. There are a few names that I haven't actually covered. I think there are a few names that are being mentioned in the book that I haven't covered yet. So if you guys are interested in seeing more about them as well, leave your comments. You know, leave comments talking about that. And let me know if you want to see more of it. I'm gonna debate on that myself. I'm gonna think about it. I'm gonna see what their work is like, and possibly in the future I'm going to be talking about them more. But yeah, this Friday it's going to be the final stream for the influences, and I'm going to be showing you guys maybe this Friday as well, or the week that follows, the actual book. You know, the reason why I decided to do all this stuff, and just show you guys the years from the 20s all the way up to the 70s of his work. His incredible, beautiful pinup art. So this week is going to be pretty exciting. Wednesday is also going to be a really interesting special special intro. So make sure you tune back in then to see it. See what it is. But if you guys agree with all this stuff, a lot of the stuff that I mentioned, talk about it with your friends. Talk about it with other people. Discuss how you're going to do it. There's no way around it. If people are talking you out of it, it's because they're complicit, or they're just too scared, or they support it and they're just covertly pretending as if that wouldn't work. They're trying to talk you out of it. Some people do it for power trips because they want to see if they could influence somebody's point of view. But considering all this stuff and considering the very important point of you don't know what's going to happen, with your life. You don't want it to be that the entire life is just dedicated to serving these greedy, deranged corporations that are backing fascism. You don't want that to be the only thing that your existence is about, because who knows, are you going to get another chance at life? Why should you spend that life serving these deranged people who want to basically exploit you and then kill you off? There are all these other possibilities. There's all these ways to fix problems and issues. None of them are approached. None of them are taken. There are a bunch of excuses made because they don't care about that. They just care about money, power, fame, and that's it. It's a high. It's a high like, I want to say it's similar to this of what we all know, the idea of like gambling. Why is that considered to be such a problem? Because it's a high. Once you get on it, it really morphs people's perspective, attitude, outlook, all that stuff. There's so many different things that come into play. There's also, of course, there's people who have been exploited and they had to work their way through all that exploitation, and they feel like if somebody gets it any other way, it's unfair to them. So basically, I want you to experience my misery in order for it to feel right. And that's an unsustainable and crazy way to go about anything. Imagine if everybody's just like taking that approach for situations like, oh, I felt this terrible experience, I need you to feel that terrible experience. What kind of a society we would have if everybody took that on board? It's insane. It's an insane trickle-down system. That's fueled by spite, hate, resentment, anger. That's not a sustainable society, and incredibly ignorant and deranged society that's based on this idea. It isn't the fault of the person that the system was so broken. It's not the fault of the people who are trying to live a better life. It's the fault of the system that created that for that person to experience. So if anything, they should be taking out their frustration at the system that did that to them, as opposed to the people who are trying to avoid that same experience. But again, the way that it's made is to fight people against each other. They present these corporations, they present these ideas to others. Like, is it fair if we forgive student loan debt? Since you had to pay for it and you had to do it? Well, if the system wasn't so exploitive, I wouldn't have had to do it. So really, it's the system at fault. So absolutely, in order to fix that, it should be forgiven. In order to stop this from happening over and over and over again, to prevent this constant, repetitive nonsense, we have to tackle the system. So there's multiple schools of thought that will go into it. All of them are misled. Some people intentionally don't want you to, because again, as I mentioned, they want you to be a wage slave. It makes them rich. They don't have to share anything. You know, they don't have to share the limelight. You know, if their entire philosophy is a Nazi philosophy, the survival of the fittest, they're going to want to see you below. You know, it's another sickness that comes from arrogance. Getting off on seeing other people below them makes them feel better about their insecurities. All these toxic philosophies that don't solve anything other than just ego stroke. And those people want to perpetuate it because they don't want to change. They just want to take everybody down, you know, or bring them below them so that they won't have to change. Brat syndrome. That's exactly what brats act like. It's a mental disorder. And why perpetuate it when we can create a better future? Anyways, everybody, that's my rant for today. That's my political rant. Join me tomorrow. I'm going to be back again doing figure drawing basics. And also going to be doing a project stream, which is going to be painting. I'm going to be doing some digital oil painting, which I'm looking forward to as well. That's tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here at the Art Lounge Alley. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it just as much as I did. If you did, just remember to hit the like and subscribe button. And I will see you tomorrow.